Today we're talking trucks, but first a gentle reminder. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification icon. If you know anything about trucks, you likely know practically everything about these two, and that's because the Chevrolet Silverado and Ford F-150 are two of the best-selling vehicles in America. Hell, in the world. Fresh off a complete redesign for 2019, the Silverado is newer than its crosstown opponent by an entire presidential term. Remember, the F-150 was last overhauled in 2015 when it gained an all-aluminum body and bed, but newer doesn't always mean better. Today we're going to find out which one of these rigs has an edge. I'll be comparing them in several important ways, looking at things like real-world fuel economy, on-road performance both loaded and unloaded, plus we're going to explore features and amenities. There is a lot to get through, so buckle up and let's get going. But first, a little background information about our contenders. Most importantly, both are powered by downsized, turbocharged gasoline engines displacing an identical 2.7 liters. The Silverado features a brand new inline-4. The F-150 brandishes a familiar EcoBoost V6. With advanced transmissions and significant weight reductions, these power plants promise greater performance and efficiency than traditional V8s. The Chevy arrived in mid-range LT trim with four-wheel drive, an extended cab body, and a 6.5-foot bed. Well, technically 79.44 inches, but who's counting? Ford provided us with a mainstream XLT model, also fitted with four-wheel drive, but prioritizing passenger comfort over payload capability, it's got a larger crew cab body and a 5.5-foot cargo box. For the most part, these trucks stack up well, but pricing is one place where they do diverge a little. Including destination, the Chevy here checked out at $49,365. The Ford? It's worth $54,850, a difference of nearly $5,500. Now that crew cab body tacks on a couple grand, plus there's a $995 upcharge for EcoBoost. With all of that out of the way, let's talk engines. Now, this here is the F-150's powerful and smooth-running 2.7-liter twin-turbo V6. This thing has both port and direct fuel injection, an ultra-durable compacted graphite iron block, piston cooling jets, a variable displacement oil pump, and even more technology. This little dynamo delivers an impressive 325 horsepower with 400 pound-feet of torque. It's matched exclusively to a 10-speed automatic transmission. Looking at the rear end, we've got an electronically locking differential with a 355 axle ratio. As for efficiency, the EPA says this rig is good for 19 miles per gallon around town, 24 on the highway, and 21 mpg combined. Helping inflate those numbers, the engine features automatic stop-start, which kills combustion when the truck isn't moving. Oh, and it all runs just fine on regular-grade gasoline. Obviously, the Chevy here is down 2 cylinders compared to the Ford, but don't forget the overall displacement. The lung capacity of these two engines is the same. Also making up any lost ground, GM engineers threw every technology they had at this thing to make it one cutting-edge four-banger. It features cylinder deactivation, variable valve lift, direct fuel injection, and a quick spooling dual-volute turbocharger. There's also an electric water pump and active thermal management, which warms certain parts of the engine up first for improved efficiency. The block and head are cast of aluminum. There are piston cooling jets and a variable displacement oil pump. Of course, the connecting rods and crankshaft are forged. The result of all that technology is 310 horsepower and 348 pound-feet of torque, a little less of each than in the F-150. This 2.7 is matched to an 8-speed automatic transmission and an automatically locking 342 rear end. Expect 19 miles per gallon around town, 22 on interstate drives, and 20 mpg combined. Just like the Ford, there's automatic stop-start, and it happily runs on 87-octane fuel. Now, you could argue GM's available 5.3-liter V8 with dynamic fuel management is a better rival to the Ford EcoBoost 6, and you'd be making a valid argument. That small block delivers 355 horsepower with 383 pound-feet. But again, we wanted to compare downsized, turbocharged engines, and these are the same displacement and have very similar output figures. Plus, if you want that 5.3 V8, it's going to cost you nearly $1,400 extra in a Silverado LT. Even though the Chevy is slightly down on power, torque, and gears, it still has some important advantages. As these two trucks sit, the Silverado can haul more weight, up to 1,893 pounds. The F-150 here is only rated at 1,690. However, Ford does offer a payload package that boosts that figure to 1,950 pounds. When it comes to towing, this Ford can drag up to 7,600 pounds. The Chevy is only rated at 6,893. One ace up the Silverado's sleeve is storage space. Not only does this new Durabed have a high-strength steel floor and 12 fixed tie-down points, it also offers more storage space than rival pickup boxes. With a 6.5-foot bed right here, we've got 72 cubic feet. If you go with the 5.5-footer, you still get 63, which is 10 more than in the Ford. Focusing our attention inward, let's look at the cabins and amenities of these two trucks, and you probably won't be surprised to learn they have a lot in common. Both feature advanced infotainment systems with 8-inch touchscreens. They've got blind spot monitoring, power sliding rear windows, cargo box lighting, power outlets, spray-in bed liners, both 4- and 7-pin connectors, plus integrated trailer brake controllers. There are 18-inch aluminum wheels, running boards, tilt and telescopic steering columns, plus much more. See, I told you they were comparably equipped. Setting the Silverado apart, it has a power-lowering tailgate, leather seating surfaces, dual-zone climate control, and keyless entry. As for the F-150, it counters with things like adjustable pedals, a huge twin-panel moonroof, and Pro Trailer Backup Assist. But it also has an old-fashioned metal key, which is frankly unacceptable at 55 grand. Neither of these trucks are going to win any awards for their interiors. That new Ram 1500 clearly beats them both in this department. Both cabins are made largely of hard plastic, but the Chevy's is particularly disappointing since it's brand new. The climate control assembly is creaky and there are sharp mold part lines on the steering wheel, door handle, and door trim. Yeah, no thank you. The Silverado does have room for 6 passengers thanks to this front buckety sort of bench seat, which is partially enabled by this large flip-up center console here. Now under the lower cushion you've got a generous storage cubby, which is very nice to have, but behind the wheel I don't feel that I really fit in this truck very well. Everything is kind of a reach, the dashboard is very high, the seat is somewhat low, plus these things are harder than granite and flatter than a bowling lane. Since the Chevy here only has an extended cab body, it's not as spacious as the crew cab Ford, duh. But the good news is it's still quite roomy, and 6-footers should have no trouble being comfortable for hours. The first thing I notice about sitting in the Ford here is just how much better these front seats are. They're plush but supportive, and really just about perfect for my body at least. As for the rest of this truck's interior, I think it's just a touch nicer and friendlier, more inviting than the cabin of the Chevy. As for the crew cab body, it offers miles of backseat legroom, plus the floor is basically flat, which makes it a snap-to-slide cargo right into the truck. No, the F-150's cabin isn't perfect either. There is some low-rent plastic and questionable elements here and there, but overall it does feel just a touch nicer than the Silverado's. Now, to make this comparison more worthwhile, we wanted to include some numbers, things like real-world fuel economy and 0 to 60 performance. So here's a brief explanation of our methodology, but if you don't care, well, feel free to skip ahead a minute or so. For the 0 to 60 times, we clocked these trucks on the same day, on the same section of road, with the same driver, me. We put them in sport mode, left traction control on, brake torqued them, and took off. For the loaded 0 to 60 times, we added about 1,000 pounds of ballast to the beds. In this case, 5 flathead V8 engine blocks. These lumps of iron weigh around 190 pounds each, which equates to 950 in total. 2 passengers on board push things well past the half-ton mark, and for reference, with 1,000 pounds of cargo on board, that uses up about 53% of the Chevy's rated hauling capacity, roughly 59% of the Ford's. Next, we took each truck on a 100-mile fuel economy loop at the same time in the same conditions. Before setting out, we filled the gas tanks and reset the trip computers. This route included country 2-lane driving and time on the highway, though we also threw in urban, dirt roads, and a bit of idling as well. Halfway through, we switched drivers and headed back, filling up at the same gas station again. But now for some actual driving. I know it's about damn time. Going into this comparison, I've got to admit I did not have high hopes for this Silverado's engine. I mean, 2.7 liters is huge for a 4-cylinder, and I figured it would vibrate like a cement mixer and sound like an overworked bulldozer, but I'm happy to report I was completely, totally wrong. You see, this thing is actually silky smooth, it's quiet, and far more powerful than I ever expected. No, it doesn't respond with quite the same immediacy as the Ford, taking a second or two to catch its breath, but it still hustles this truck with absolute ease. Our testing revealed this engine can push the Silverado from 0 to 60 in about 7.9 seconds, which is a more than respectable performance. Now, after we tossed half a ton in the bed, that did grow to about 9.2, an increase of roughly 1.3 seconds, which is still not that bad. Speaking of loads, when hauling freight, this Silverado's normally pretty stiff and starchy ride settles down beautifully. The added mass really smothers out the harshness. Now, this Chevy's engine may be absolutely dynamite, but unfortunately the transmission it's bolted to is anything but. It's an 8-speed automatic, and it's a little bit indecisive, it's kind of slow to shift, and it feels a little busy too. But most concerning of all is the shift quality. A few times, 4 or 5 times during the week that I've been driving this truck, there have been some absolutely hammering gear changes. In fact, one of them it felt like I got rear-ended because my head flew forward and got slammed back into the headrest. That's how hard it upshifted. And I wasn't doing anything weird, it was just normal 1/3 to 1/2 throttle, 2 to 3 upshift, and then suddenly out of nowhere, bam! I think this transmission needs a lot more tuning work. At least this Chevy feels a lot livelier than the Ford, if a 5,100 plus pound truck could ever be described as sporty. The ride is noticeably firmer, it also has sharper steering and a lot less body roll while going through corners. On our fuel economy loop, the Silverado clocked 102.5 miles. At the gas station, using the same pump as before, we topped it up with 5.243 gallons of fuel. Doing the math, that resulted in 19.55 miles per gallon. In comparison, the truck's trip computer said it averaged 20.5. Either way, that's pretty much right in line with its 20 mile per gallon combined rating. Swapping trucks, it's immediately apparent just how much softer and gentler this F-150 feels than the Silverado. The steering ratio seems slower, and there's a bit more body roll, and of course the ride is just a touch more compliant as well. Oddly enough, I think the gauges are a little bit easier to read too. Another benefit? This EcoBoost V6 has torque everywhere in the rev range, from idle right up to where the transmission shifts. It just pulls like a freight train, and that's something that makes this truck noticeably more responsive than the Silverado. And of course, that's something that was reflected in the F-150's 0 to 60 performance. Unloaded, we clocked it in at about 6.7 seconds. It's a very similar story, of course. Once you throw half a ton of scrap metal in the bed, that time only increased by about 1 second. Not surprisingly, the soft Ford felt even squishier when loaded, its nose seeming to point much higher in the air than the Chevy's when similarly burdened. The F-150's brakes are also not as confidence-inspiring as the Silverado's. It has a much firmer, meatier pedal. This 10-speed transmission is also pretty much unflappable. It upshifts for the most part extremely smoothly and will drop down as many gears as you need in just about the blink of an eye, all with none of the Chevy's drivetrain bewilderment. The only real complaint I have against it is that occasionally when you're rolling up to, say, a stop sign, you will feel it downshifting. One strike against the Ford is, I think its interior is a little bit louder than the Chevy's. It's particularly apparent when you're driving at lower speeds on dirt roads. You get sort of this booming sound echoing in the cabin. Also, when stones get kicked up, they make these very loud, harsh, sort of tinkling sounds against the underside of the aluminum bodywork. Finally, we come to our fuel economy results. Back at the gas station, this Ford registered 101.3 miles and drank 4.855 gallons of petroleum distillates. On paper, that works out to 20.87 miles per gallon, damn close to what the computer claimed at 20.9 mpg, and, more importantly, to its EPA combined rating of 21. As for efficiency, I'm going to call it a wash. The Ford here was only 1.3 miles per gallon ahead of the Chevy, and on different days with different drivers, it could have easily gone the other way. But at this point, I am ready to be done with this very long video, so let's recap the advantages and disadvantages of each of these trucks. Looking up, the Silverado's valiant four-cylinder engine is praiseworthy. It handles loads with ease, offers surprising dynamics, and has the most versatile bed in the business. As for the F-150, that EcoBoost V6's performance is astounding. Its transmission is on point, the seats and cabin comfort are stellar, and it offers a decently smooth ride. But now for some downsides. The Chevy's interior needs work. Its ride is a bit harsh when empty. That transmission just, ugh. Its front seats ain't great, and the overall performance is a hair off the pace set by Ford. As for the F-150, its interior isn't much better. It lacks keyless entry and push-button start at $55 grand, has a squishy feeling brake pedal, and dull steering. All right, at this point, I think you can probably guess which truck wins. Even though it's years older, the F-150 just impressed me in more ways than the much fresher Silverado. So in this comparison test with these two particular trucks and their equally sized engines, I'm giving it to Ford, though as always, please leave a comment down below whether you agree with me or not. Thanks for watching. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the AutoGuide.com YouTube channel to get all of our latest features and vehicle reviews.